Thank you for joining us on this episode of Legal Angle with Emmanuel the Law Olawale. I have a wonderful guest today. She's been in the legal field for over 30 years. She's currently a judge of the court of the municipal court in Franklin County. She presides over cases, criminal cases that are misdemeanor cases, and civil cases that are less than $15,000. Welcome to the show, Judge Paley.
My pleasure.
I would like you to introduce yourself more to our audience.
My name is Eileen Paley. I'm from, I can't say I was born in Columbus because my dad was in the military. So I was actually born in Arizona, Fort Huachuca, Arizona, actually. But I was raised in Columbus. I went to Columbus Public Schools and then Ohio State for undergrad. And I have a degree in psychology with an undergrad degree in business and in the honors program, which is the capstone program, which integrates arts and sciences with business. I went to Capital Law School, and then for a very brief period of time, I worked for a firm doing securities law, surprisingly enough, and then put out my own shingle until I got on city council. Well, no, until I got on the bench 5.5 years ago, because I practiced when I was on city council. So I was in private practice. I was in general practice. I've done just about every kind of law there is, except for probably workers' comp. Most of my clients were small businesses in the construction trade, and I had a lot of dentist clients because my dad was a dentist. So I did all kinds of things for them. But I did everything from criminal to bankruptcies to I've done some zoning cases. I did a lot in municipal court. In fact, I was the chair of the municipal court committee for the Bar Association at one time, back in the 90s, I think. And I kept my practice up until I got on the bench, and I sold it 6 months before I got on the bench, taking that chance that I would get elected, because I knew I was ready for a change at that point. So, I have been on a lot of boards in the community. I was on the board of the Neighborhood House, which is a community house in the King Lincoln District, which I was very proud of. I'm presently probably one of the longest serving board members for the Greater Columbus Arts Council, which I love. I'm very much into art and art in the community. And I've been on various other boards. Let's see. I'm presently, I was a civil service commissioner for about 7 years with the city until I got on Columbus City Council, which I also was on for about 7 to 8 years. I was on a lot of committees on city council, and a lot of committees that normally people don't do together because they're very large committees. So I was the chair of public service and transportation as well as utilities at the same time, which kept me really busy. And I did a lot. I was administration, which at the time was the Community Relations Board and the Veterans Affairs Committee, administration. And then about 5.5 years ago, my dream came true and I became a judge. I ran the first time in 1997 and lost. And it took me 20 years to get the nerve up to try again. So mainly because the first time put me in the hospital because I worked so hard. And I didn't want to do that again. So when people run for office, the first thing I say is, eat well, take your vitamins, and get your sleep, because it's really important that you stay alive to take office. And so that was that. I've really had a good time since I've been on the bench. I've kind of, as Scott Kirschman said on your show last week, which I thought it was a great catchphrase, beyond the bench. I really think it's really, really important for people to remember that judges are elected officials, and more importantly, that judges remember they're elected officials and that they should serve the public. and that there is a need outside of the courthouse. So I spent a lot of time in the community. I started a program called Courthouse to the Community when I was on city council, because I thought people are afraid to go to the courthouse. They associate it with bad things. And I wanted people to understand what resources were available to them, because they're paying taxes, which is what's keeping the courthouse open. So I've continued that program. And then this year, when I was going to run, well, I am running for election, but I'm unopposed, I started a program called Courthouse Connections, a guide to available resources, that we've had on Facebook for probably since November and December.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you. And you started off with a bachelor degree in psychology.
Yeah.
Did you want to become a psychologist or a therapist?
Well, the really funny thing was, I was a business major until my senior year. I don't even know, and I hated accounting. So I switched to psychology because it was a big interest of mine. But then I ended up taking accounting for the honors program, and computer science. I did a lot, but I'm so old that it was back when, just right after punch cards. So we had Fortran, so it's a little out of date, COBOL, and things like that.
Basics.
I would have loved to have been a clinical psychologist, but in all honesty, a lot of people don't know this. It's a lot harder to be a clinical psychologist than it is to be an attorney.
I think you're right.
You go to Ohio State, you have to have a 4 point back then to get into that program, which I did not have. So.
And what made you decide to go into law?
That's funny, because I was always going to go into law. In fact, I had a girlfriend when I was in high school that moved to England right after high school. And when she came back like 15 years later, she looked in the bar directory because she knew I'd be there. And I was. So I even though my degree was in psychology, that was kind of because your parents tell you always to have an option. I always knew I never really had a choice in my head. I was always going to be an attorney.
Thank you.
To my dad's dismay, because he wanted me to be a dentist, but oh well.
You end up being a lawyer that represents dentists.
Exactly. That's why.
And in 1997, when you first ran to become a judge, you lost that election. What lessons did you take from that campaign?
I don't think that it was to work harder. It was because I couldn't have worked harder. Money is important, which was a little bit depressing. I really, really enjoyed it. I did a lot of things and met a lot of people I would have never have met. I became very active in the community after that. So I tell people that I don't regret it at all. And neither have I ever met anybody who's run and lost regretted it either. It changes your life to the positive. It makes you community active. I still know people that I met when I ran in 1997. It changed my life forever, and I loved it.
Yeah. And you went to the city council in 2009. What inspired you to seek a seat on the council?
When I was an undergrad, I worked for Representative Stinziano, senior, not the young one, in the State House. I volunteered actually for a year for him, and I worked in his constituent relations program, which basically I answered the phone, and according to Representative Cinziano, whatever they needed, I got done. So I really enjoyed being out in the community and helping people solve problems, and so that. But I always wanted to stay local. I have never had an interest in running statewide, and I really don't have an interest. I mean, I am countywide now, but it's a municipal court. I have no interest in being in common pleas court. So because at that time I was interested in local legislation and how people can make a difference, that's why wanted to go to city council. And one of my fellow law school friends was on city council at the time, Michael Mennel, and we had a lot of conversations, and he had a lot of faith in me, and I have a lot of faith in him. And it's funny because now he's on the bench.
Wow. And you spent 6 years on the city council. What would you consider your major achievements while in the Columbus City Council?
This may sound really funny. So I have a habit of getting into areas that normal people don't do. So because I was the chair of public service, they had a committee that of people with disabilities or differently abled. And I started going to this committee, and they were like, "Why are you coming here? City council members don't come." And I said, "Because I'm interested in what you talk about." So I said, "If you had a wish list, what would it be?" And one of the things was parking meters that we could reach. And I thought, well, that seems really easy. Like, why don't they do this? And I went back to public service and I said, "Can you cut the parking meters in half, the handicap parking meters?" And they said, "Well, yeah." So they did. But in the same time, so that's why you see half-size parking meters because of me. I did a lot of work with the court at that time because I also was the chair of the courthouse and the clerk's office. So I helped start the special entity dockets, the catch court. And the way I did that was I did some research on the jail fund, and I convinced my colleagues that if I could reduce the jail fund, could I have the money for what I needed to reduce the jail fund? Because at that time we didn't have any money for that. So they gave me a year to do it, and we were very successful with that. We actually did reduce, because when you take things like human trafficking that are a revolving door in the jail and you remove them from the jail, then it saves money. So my mantra was saving lives and saving money. And that was how I pushed that through. And then from the catch court came the drug court, and then the second drug court, then the mental health court, then the military court. So I didn't, as a judge, start those programs. I helped as a city council member. So I would say those are two of the funnest things I did, as well as roads, sidewalks, stoplights, Parsons Avenue, millions of other streets, um, a lot of other things, but those are the things that come off my head.
Wow. Thank you, especially for advocating for those who are disabled to get a meter that is half of what it used to be. I think they should call those meters Payless meters. For people that don't know. Now let's talk about addiction and the intersection of addiction with criminality and the law. Now, according to the U.S. Department of Justice, drug users in the general population are more likely than non-users to commit crimes. What has been your experience in the courtroom with this correlation?
I think people would be shocked at the percentage of the crimes that are related to drugs. And I'll give you a little example that surprised me. When I first got on the bench, I had a young lady who was arrested for stealing diapers and baby formula, dry baby formula. And I said, "Oh, I felt bad for her. She's stealing for her baby." And one of the prosecutors looked at me and said, "No, she's not stealing for her baby, because they cut drugs with dry baby formula, and diapers are the hottest thing on the market right now to get cash for drugs." So I figured out that when I see people with diapers and Similac or baby formula, that most likely they're not stealing for their babies, and they probably don't have any. But what that shows is how desperate people are. But if you stop and ask them, say, look, I'm not going to put you in jail if you just are honest and you reach out, because what I'm going to do is help you. And so we kind of looked around to figure out how to fix that problem. I would say Franklin County is probably one of the most progressive, I would say it's the most progressive court in the state and probably in the country when it comes to that for a lot of reasons. Um, we, over the last couple years, we have switched our probation department to be evidence-based, which means that if you violate on technical violations anymore, we don't put you in jail. What we try to do is find what's causing you to violate and fix that. There's obviously consequences for bad behavior, but jail should be our last resort. And I think another thing that deals with addiction is mental health. I mean, one of the two biggest problems in the last decade or so that has created people in jail, besides systematic racism, is the elimination of mental hospitals and orphanages. The two systems that don't exist to replace those things have created a lot of homelessness, which creates a lot of self-medication and a lot of depression, which leads to drug addiction. So I think Sheriff Baldwin would tell you that, unfortunately, the jail is the largest mental health facility we have in this county. We are working very hard to change that. So we've started a couple of really good programs. One is the medically assisted treatment program that we deal with Vivitrol. And I think we're one of the first people that have done this. So Judge O'Grady, who is the head of probation, and I got together and we found out that if you're in the jail, your Medicaid doesn't work. It's gone. They shut it off. So you can't get help. So we were like, well, how do we fix this? So we found a room in the courthouse and we hired a vendor and we said, I wonder if we could just go to the door, and when they release them from the jail, we'll escort them over to our little room and we will have them talk to a probation officer and this vendor who deals with Vivitrol, but we prepare them while they're in the jail. They get their shot. We refer them to counseling, and then they can see the probation officer, and they come back once a month. So for those that don't know what Vivitrol is, unlike other medically assisted treatment, Vivitrol is a receptor blocker. So it blocks the receptors in your brain from actually feeling the effects of opiates and alcohol. It originally was started to use for alcohol addiction, which I still use it for that. Unlike Suboxone, which is a drug replacement, this, if you take Vivitrol and you do heroin, you have no effects from it. You do not get high. So there, it becomes, what's the point in spending your money if you don't get high from it? But what's more important than that is it stops the cravings for heroin, so, and other opiates. So most of the people want to quit taking opiates, but the craving is so bad and actually physically, medically painful that people can't talk themselves into going through that withdrawal and the pain of the craving. But Vivitrol, if people would try it more often, actually does eliminate that. And unlike Suboxone, it eliminates the addiction immediately. Instead of tapering it off, you stop completely. So our medically assisted treatment program has been extremely successful, but unfortunately, or fortunately for most, I would say, we cannot court order people to take drugs like Vivitrol. It's a voluntary. So I could say, if you're on Vivitrol, I'm less likely to put you in jail, but I can't order you to take it. So that program has been there. I mean, it started, I mean, I helped start that program too. So it's only been around for 2 or 3 years, and it's been extremely successful.
Thank you. And how do you determine a defendant that is before you because of addiction and those who are just before you because they feel like committing a crime?
A lot of things. Experience, number one. Attitude. Although people change their attitudes over different reasons, like I can put them in jail, and usually when they come out, they have a different attitude. But appearance. For example, meth addicts, you can almost tell immediately because they lose their teeth, they have sores on their face, they become very, very skinny. Heroin, unfortunately, a lot of people will come into the courtroom on heroin, and you can tell when they're high. So, I mean, it's obvious. And then they will have it on them. Like, so if I arrest them in the courtroom, I've had multiple occasions where they have needles in their pockets and actually got high in the bathroom prior to court. Go figure that. Some things you can tell by what they're stealing. You can tell by the charge. If they're charged with um, drug abuse instruments and it's a needle, you know they're using heroin, right? If they get charged with drug abuse instruments and it's a crack pipe, you know that they're smoking crack. Um, and different thing in repeated offenses for people that try to maintain jobs, have families, that act and are relatively normal, except, and a lot of times their family members will tell us. They'll either write me a letter or they'll come in court and say, my son's an addict and I can't get him to stop. That happens daily. And they cry, and and it's not, unfortunately, when they talk about zip codes and how people should all be equal regardless of zip codes. Unfortunately, drug addiction is equal regardless of
The zip
zip
code.
codes. I can get a Hilliard cheerleader and a Dublin cheerleader who's addicted to heroin as well as somebody from the Hilltop or Linden. It's really not discriminative, and unfortunately, a lot of it has come from people who have had surgeries and that were overdiagnosed opiates or mental health problems. Some of the mental health diagnoses have really bad side effects from the drugs that they take. For example, schizophrenic. And so they don't want to take it because they don't like the side effects. So, in order to mask it, they may get addicted to some other kind of drug. So, mental health issues is a big indication of drug addiction, also, as well as depression.
Thank you. And in your experience as a judge, what do you think works better for addicts, incarceration or rehabilitation?
I don't think incarceration is the answer for anything except people who are just evil, and there are some. And, but most people, even if they're kind of inherently bad, it's usually because it's learned behavior. And almost everyone can unlearn that behavior. So you just have to have faith in somebody. I think that if you talk to people like you would talk to your mother or your father or your daughter or your brother, instead of like they're scum of the earth, and just reach out and say, hey, what can I do to help you? You would be surprised at how many people like will break down and say, tell me what they need and I will help them. And then they come back and write me letters and hug me or whatever pre-COVID, um, to or they'll come see me at community events. Like right now, we're doing a lot of reentry clinics. Me and Judge O'Grady and Judge DeVarga have got involved in the community reentry programs. And so we'll see people, or I've gone into the jail lots of times for programs that are in the jail, like the Harmony Projects in the jails. There's a program that has like art as part of rehabilitation that the Greater Columbus Arts Council is sponsoring, and I go in for that graduation. also every time they graduate. So I think if you give people skills to avoid um, doing drugs, it's much better than putting jail. Just teaches them how to get drugs easier or how to steal better, or it doesn't help at all. But if they're not listening and they're not doing anything, and more importantly, if they're a safety threat to themselves or others, I have no choice, because my most important goal is the safety of the community.
Thank you. And the program you have right now at the municipal court, is it only for people with pending cases,
No,
or anyone from the street can just come in and,
anybody from the
submit
street.
themselves to it?
And I mean, like right now, as of today, I believe the eviction moratorium is over. So the March program does have rental assistance still. We'll have it on Monday. And not only rental assistance, but utility assistance, job training, job. I've been working with the building trades on a program for people to get really good jobs. I mean, they have prevailing wage, pensions, insurance for their families, and you can have any record, even sex offenders. And the only two requirements are that you test negative for drugs and you have a driver's license, which we are really helping people to get driver's licenses too. So which drug addiction affects that also, as well as the Bureau of Motor Vehicles creating a big black hole that people keep falling in. However, there's new legislation with regards to that too. So if you qualify, and the Bureau of Motor Vehicles has a really good website now. I got to give them credit. That if you get online, it'll tell you how you can get a lot of your fines and reinstatement fees eliminated, so that you can get a valid driver's license, because that's a large amount of municipal court, so that you don't keep incurring all these court costs and fines.
Oh, thank you. And how can people sign themselves up for this kind of treatment or benefits? Do they have to come to the courthouse, or they can just go online, or is there an office where they have to go to?
We do not have appointments. Everything on both the clinics, the Self Help Resource Center and the March program, which are right next to each other on the sixth floor of the municipal courthouse, are walk-in, first come, first serve. And except for when we were in the convention center and we were down there too, I know the Self Help Center has had lines at times. The March program, because they're also doing rental assistance, but now that March is open and they're doing rental assistance also, there shouldn't be any lines. And we just got two new attorneys for the self help clinic and two interns because of the volume that's going in there, and we've got two new people for the March program. So they're pretty set up to handle any amount of volume right now, unless it gets totally crazy, which it might. With this moratorium going away, all you can do is walk in.
Thank
I
you.
mean, we have a great new website for the Franklin County Municipal Court, and it talks about all of the programs on there, including March and the Self Help Center. But it's not going to help you sign up, and it really doesn't tell you as much as I'm telling you now.
Yeah. If you're out there and you or your family member may need this help, I will advise you to go on the court's website or listen to what the judge just said and go get help. Now, let's talk about DUI or OVI. That's I would say is the most common offense when it comes to drug related offense. I might be wrong, but that seems to be what everyone knows about DUI or OVIs. And one of the penalties of OVI is suspension of license. In your experience as a judge, does this sanction help drivers, or does it deter?
I have to be careful about what I say. Because as a judge, I got to follow the law.
I understand.
This is one of the very few laws that have mandatory sentences. And they've tried to correct that a little bit with the OVIs, except for it's too risky to even entertain the new laws that they've passed with regards to that. Most suspensions on a first offense, you can get driving privileges pretty quickly, and most judges will give it to you. On a second offense, you could probably get driving privileges pretty easily too. If you're having more than two in a short span, you've got a problem. And so, because we all make mistakes, it's a very low threshold, 0.08. So, until you actually get arrested for it, I hate to say this, you may not. I mean, I would know if I was impaired, and most people should know. And I think it depends on how much you drink and your body weight and all that other stuff. But if you're at a 0.08, you're not bombed. So the judges. I mean, let me put a disclaimer on this and say this is why it's very important that judges matter. I think that when people look at judges, they need to see where they are, what they're doing, if they're in the community, if they're only in the community during an election year. Have you seen them somewhere else? Are they doing something to make a difference in your community? That matters. So, I mean, there are judges that have their pet projects. I will tell you that this is one of Judge O'Grady's pet projects. He absolutely hates the black hole with the no-ops and the OVIs. He thinks, and I tend to agree with him, that it just, you get your license suspended because you don't pay child support, but then you can't go to work to pay child support. So how does that make any sense at all? Except that after if you end up going to jail, you might find a job, pay child support, and get your license back. So, but that's kind of rare. No, I don't think a license suspension necessarily helps people. However, it does go back to my number one job, which is the safety of the community. And trust me, if a drunken driver kills your child, you're going to hate me if I let him drive. So we must make sure that they are safe, which gets to other, tools that I've used pretty regularly, which is Scram. So what Scram is, it's like a bracelet that you put on your ankle that monitors 24/7 if you have any alcohol in your system. And if you violate that, then for sure you will not have a driver's license. We also have interlock systems that you can put in your car, and you have to blow into it, and it tests whether you have alcohol in your system before you drive. The problem I have with interlock, and why I use Scram probably more than interlock, is you can drive another car. And they do, trust me. So, people are trusting that I'm going to make the right decision. I can't say that I'm perfect all the time. I try the best I can to weigh every human life and the ability to move forward and take care of their family with the safety of the community, which includes them. Because I don't want them to get in a car accident and kill themselves either.
Exactly. So you have to balance the safety of the community and even the safety of the defendant
Right.
herself. Exactly. So
Right. So no, it doesn't always help, but it depends on the situation, I guess is the answer.
exactly. Then on the current law, some people I got this question in my email. They want to know: is there a difference between possession and selling or intent to use?
Yes, but that's a felony. Um, the municipal court only deals with the possession of marijuana in small amounts and drug abuse instruments. Anything above marijuana is a felony, which a lot of people don't understand, especially people that are recreationally using cocaine or Adderall. Sometimes I think is a misdemeanor. Um, so it depends on the amount. So if it's and it's a lot larger than most people think, if you have a large amount of drugs, then you're considered a trafficker. Also, they will look at when you were arrested, did you have scales? Were you processing it for sale, like baggies? And do you have a logbook of the money that you're receiving for your drugs? Did you have a lot of money in your pocket? A lot more because you're unemployed. Like, I just had a case in 4D where the guy had $147,000 on him. That's a lot of drugs.
Oh, wow. And they can't account for how he had that money.
We know how he had that money, or allegedly how he had that money. There was a drug transaction for large amounts of drug, kilos. So,
Okay. It brings me to my next question. There is in Ohio right now, medical marijuana is legal. If you have prescription for it. Let's assume that someone who has prescription for it, they are on it, and they got into their car, drove, but they were influenced by that driving, and they got charged with OVI. How will the court handle a case like that?
it's very difficult, to be honest with you. They're working on that because I tell this to people all the time. It's not illegal to drink or smoke marijuana and drive. It's illegal to be impaired. So even if you're under .08, you could still receive a driving while impaired if you are impaired. So they're very difficult to prosecute, I will tell you that. It's a matter of they have drug experts that come in and testify, but it's got to be a pretty good case for them to do that. Or, a lot of times people are really bold. I mean, they'll smoke marijuana right in front of the police officers driving next to them. So, they know they're smoking it. They roll it down, they see it, they can smell it. So that's part of the evidence. The problem is there's different effects from marijuana than there is for alcohol. Normally, people that smoke marijuana do different things than people that drink. They don't weave. They go really, really slow when they're smoking marijuana. So that's usually what they get arrested for is, believe it or not, driving too slow. They tend not to get in accidents like driving under the influence. During COVID, I don't think I've seen any of them. Because of COVID, they're being really careful about who they're arresting and why. Although I think, well, I don't know if that's going to change because it seems like our numbers are going back up. And with the new chief of police and her community activity, I'm hoping that we see a good change in the community. That's very well needed.
Thank you. And while you were on the city council, you helped establish a special docket that handles offenders with addiction and solicitation. Can you tell us more about this?
Well, there's 5 specialty dockets that begin. The first one was Catch, which is the human trafficking or prostitution solicitation court. That court is a 2-year program. It has wraparound services. It's like a big AA meeting. You come into court with all your, with a lot of people that have the same problem and the same issue, and they have, not only do they have probation officers, but they have caseworkers. So, they help them find sober living and jobs and mental health treatment. And then they have a big graduation and they have special jobs that they can get. And they've been very successful. But to get somebody to commit to do it is kind of hard. So we have the Catch Court. We have and they change their names all the time. The Mental Health Court is Link. And that is all people that have mental health problems. It's run by Judge Morehart, and they are not like a big AA meeting because their mental health issues do not allow to be in a big room with a lot of people. But they have specialized treatment plans for each people in it, and they also have a big graduation. And then there's 2 drug courts. One is an opiate court and one is the non-opiate court. It's kind of the OBI court. It deals mostly with alcohol. And because opiates, although Vivitrol works for both opiates and alcohol abuse, they're totally different to deal with as far as addiction is concerned. Um, so there's two drug courts. One is run by Judge Tyak, and one is run by Judge Thomas. And um, then there's the MAVS court, which is the military and veterans court. And they help veterans because there are a lot of resources available for veterans. And there's a lot of issues that veterans have, including PTSD, some unusual drug habits due to Vietnam and other places that they've been. And that is run by Judge Barrows, and it's also been very successful. And I'm really happy to say that we just got funding for a new program called UP, which means unleashing potential, and it's going to be run, and it was founded by Judge Jessica DeVarga, and it's for defendants between the ages of 18 and 25. Because as we know, even though we turn 18, it's medically certain that our brain has not finished developing, and sometimes we make bad choices that can affect the rest of our adult life. And people between the ages of 18 and 25 have special needs for special reasons. A lot of them are coming from people that are aging out of foster care, because once you reach 18, you're just kind of on the street, and that's not a good thing either. So we'll see how that goes. I'm really proud of Judge DeVarga for starting this program. I hope it's very successful. And then the other program that I started, which I'm really proud of because it's the first in the world, is called Cap It. And it is a program for domestic violence in the LGBTQ community. Because if you think, and this is where my psychology background came in, when legal equality for marriage came into law, I had a same-sex domestic violence partner in my courtroom, and I thought to myself, how does that work? They want them to go to domestic violence counseling. Well, domestic violence counseling is gender-based. It teaches you how to get along with the opposite sex. So I'm like, how does that work? And so I actually, for 2 years, got together with a round table of people from the community, from Stonewall, from Equitas Health, from the prison system, Southeast, mental health, and some judges. And we wrote the curriculum for this program. It's never been done before, and it's a very successful, and I'm very proud of it.
Wow, thank you for doing that, for thinking outside the box and providing services that otherwise did not exist before that time. And I'm
Well, we
sure
took
a lot of people have benefited from it.
yeah, we took a good 6 months to try to find one. There is no program like ours.
Thank you. And you were on the city council for a while, then you decide to run again for office. And ironically or coincidentally, you took the seat of your former mentor.
Judge
Tell
Taylor.
us about that story.
Well, Judge Taylor was one of the very few women judges, one of the first women judges on the Franklin County bench. And I practiced law in that court, and I always admired her, and she was very open and talked to me over the years. Um, and so when I lost in 1997, it kind of became a joke because most people who run for office run again. And so everyone kept asking me, well, when are you going to do it? And I kind of said, well, when Judge Taylor retires, which I thought would never be in my lifetime. Well, then I got a call from Judge Taylor. I'm retiring. And I was like, okay, I'm in. So I decided that I had said it for so many years, over 20 years, that I would replace Judge Taylor, that when she did retire, it kind of empowered me to do that. So I'm very glad I did, because I always wanted to be a judge, and I think I make a difference every single day. I think the people do too, which is one of the reasons I don't have an opponent. And I was very instrumental in us getting our new courthouse too. So,
Tell us about that.
so when I got on the bench, the first thing that happened was Judge Brandt. I went to my first judges meeting, and Judge Brandt said, well, Paley, you're the head of the renovation committee. And I'm like, renovation committee? I thought I got to pick my committees I wanted to be on. It's like, no, you're on the renovation committee. Here's the book. And it was like, 5,000 pages long. And the first thing I did was look at the book and say, this is impossible. You can't do this. Because I understood funding, and it was financially impossible for the city to do that. I don't know who and what they were thinking. So when I got elected, we had a new mayor on the same night. And so he had an awesome chief of staff who came over, and I kind of gave it to him and said, um, tell me what you think about this. And then he looked at me weird, and I said, yeah, we can't do this. So I said, the only way we're ever going to get this done is if we bond it. It has to be bonded. There's no other way. But, nobody in the courthouse would know that. They don't deal with funding for the city, right? So I talked the mayor into putting it on the ballot. It passed. They just passed the legislation a couple weeks ago to purchase the property, and I'm following that. And I'm going to meet with the owner's rep, which is the person who works on the RFP for the construction and the design of the new courthouse. And they have assured me that it will be open when I'm still alive. So I'm excited.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
We just got a question that I'm going to read to you. The person says, Judge referred to BMV creating a hole for people to get into. It's not deliberate, or how can citizens be helped out of this?
I'm sorry, I misunderstood the question.
They said you mentioned that the BMV creates a hole for people to get into. So the person is asking, how can people get out of this hole?
Okay, so there is a lot of ways now. There weren't. If you get on the Bureau of Motor Vehicle website, they have a new program that actually was a law that passed that made permanent their programs to help people that can't afford the reinstatement fees and fines that are stopping them from getting licenses. And if you qualify, then they will reduce or eliminate some of those financial barriers that are stopping people from getting licenses. As well as, if that doesn't work, then you can come to court services at the court and go to the judge that actually sentenced you. I mean, I will tell you, if it's me, I will make arrangements. And there are several things that I can do. I could, depending on your ability, eliminate them. I'm more than happy to trade court costs and fines for community service. And what I tell people is, I love this city, and I like doing community service personally. It's usually the highlight of my week. If I work, at a reentry clinic or a food bank or the neighborhood house or Gladden or any place that needs me. And we just recently, as a court, changed the community service rate to $15 an hour. So if you want to do community service, we will apply $15 an hour towards court costs and fines and reinstatement fees, so that you can get out of that black hole.
And now, talking about community service, you started the program called Courthouse to the Community.
Right.
Tell us about this program.
Well, because I like going to the courthouse, because if I can't say I ever made a lot of money as an attorney. I will just say that, because I spent most of my career helping people that couldn't afford me. But that's okay. So when I saw people at the courthouse, usually they walked out with a resolution to something, or a roadmap to how to resolve their problems. And I did a lot of work in juvenile court and family law too, which is where I did most of that. And what I found were a lot of people weren't showing up in court, and so that would get them in a lot of other trouble. And when they did, they were too afraid and they didn't want to talk about things. And so I decided that if I brought the courthouse to them and showed them that we would treat, could help them, that maybe we could resolve a lot of problems. And it did. So we would go to recreation centers or churches. And I would bring every department from the courthouse, the clerk of court, probation, court services, the judges, prosecutors, public defenders. And we had little tables with information. And we did this for years. And then when I got on the bench, we continued that program. But since COVID, we haven't done it.
Oh, thank you. In 2020, which is just last year, NBC4 named you as one of 4 Central Ohio Remarkable Women. What was it like to be so honored? One of 4.
It was amazing. That other people thought I was amazing. It was probably one of the best things that ever happened. And the other 3 women that were also finalists, we are still friends today. Like, we went out and met each other and got to know each other. And they are great women that do a lot for the community. I think it's important that the community recognize what people do. And I've done a lot. I just didn't think anybody was watching. So it was a shocker, to be honest. A neighbor of mine submitted that. And I was just, okay. When they called me, I got to do an interview with Carol Looper, who I really, it wasn't Carol Looper, it was the other.
Colleen Marshall?
Colleen Marshall, another attorney she's awesome.
She went to Capitol too.
Yes, she is really awesome. We ended up talking for like an hour after the interview, and all the things that she does in the community too was amazing. So my family was very proud of me. My husband bragged about it for a year. So it was nice.
Oh, thank you. And your career has always been community focused. What inspired you to dedicate most of your career to serving the community?
I think this may sound really strange, but high school. I went to a public school that had a lot of problems with the kids and the families there. And my sister became a drug counselor for that reason, and I became an attorney. And I can't tell you how many people I still see that I went to high school with. I knew that they were good people. A lot of them just needed some help. And I was like that in high school too. So I just kind of carried it forward.
And you've done a lot for the city of Columbus and Franklin County throughout your career. Wow. And how does it feel to be running for office without actually running? You know what I mean?
A dream come true and a prayer that is very definitely answered. It allows me the opportunity to be a mentor to a lot of young attorneys who want to be judges. It allows me a lot of time to spend with them more than worrying about whether I'm going to get elected, which I think it's really important because, I've taught them a lot of things. Like, obviously, Scott Kirschman got beyond the bench because I emphasize to everyone that I talk to, and most people that want to run for judge do talk to me, how important it is to be a community servant. And in fact, I sign all of my correspondence in servant leadership because I think that people really need to understand that we serve the public. And I make sure, and I actually give classes on how to run for office too. And like the golden rule is volunteers are always right. Kind of like, when you're a waitress, your client's always right. Because people they're certainly not there because they're making money. So when you see somebody wearing a t-shirt of somebody else, it's because they believe in them, right? And somebody gave them a reason to wear that t-shirt or to put that sign in the front yard. So it's really important to emphasize, and you can pretty much trust that. So if you like your neighbor and they've got somebody sign in their yard, then say, you know, that person believes in them, I probably will too, even if I don't know them. So those are the kind of little helpful hints that people need to know, that people remember when they don't like you more than when they like you. So don't give them a reason not to like you, right?
And what do you mean by saving money while saving lives?
I came up with that when you're on city council and you're passing legislation, you give a little speech right before you pass it, and then they get to ask you questions. And so when I did the catch court funding, that was, because when you're a public legislator, it's taxpayer money, right? So everything you do costs money, and people get upset. Like, why are you spending money on this? So I that's what I said when I did the catch court, saving money and saving lives, because we were saving money and we are saving lives. So, and I think we can do that. It costs about between $85 and $95 a day to house somebody in a jail, and it doesn't do anything. So why spend that money when we can spend $85 or $95 a day on a program that'll keep them out of jail? That's what that means, saving money, saving lives.
Thank you. And I hope for those who are watching this program that the information that you have gleaned from the judge today will save your life and save you money. Because if you listen to the judge, you probably won't end up in jail. You probably won't have to pay a fine, and it could possibly save your life. Thank you, Judge Paley, for coming on to Legal Angle. It's been an honor and a pleasure to interview you.
My pleasure too. You do a lot of good work too, and I did buy your book.
Oh, thank you. I hope you enjoy it. And for those of you watching us at home or listening to the podcast, thank you for joining us on this episode. Until next time, stay safe and stay blessed.